Marcus Reed didn't know that saving a stranger's life would destroy everything he thought he understood about survival. One moment, he was walking his daughter home from the hospital. The next, he was drowning in a river that refused to let go. Pulling a woman in a $1,000 suit from water so cold it burned. But the real danger wasn't the current. It was what came after. Because some people you save don't just thank you and walk away. Some people break open your carefully constructed life and force you to choose between safety and truth. 2 hours earlier, Marcus had been sitting in an examination room at Ravenport Children's Hospital, watching his daughter's small chest rise and fall while Dr. Patel studied the monitor. The electrodes taped to Sophie's ribs fed data to machines that beeped softly, each sound a small prayer answered. 7 years old, and she'd spent more time in hospitals than playgrounds. Doctor, Patel turned from the screen, her expression the carefully neutral mask doctors wore when they didn't want to promise anything. We're monitoring the situation. The medications are holding steady. Her numbers look stable today. Today. That word carried weight. Not tomorrow, not next week, just today. Marcus nodded, his throat too tight for questions he already knew the answers to. Sophie sat on the paper-covered table, swinging her legs, the hospital bracelet pink against her brown skin. She'd been brave during the blood draw, hadn't cried when the needle went in, and now she was tired in a way that made his chest ache. "Daddy, my feet hurt." "I know, sweetheart." Marcus helped her down from the table, feeling the familiar weight of her in his arms before setting her on the floor. "We'll take the river path. It's shorter." He signed the discharge papers while Sophie gathered her backpack, the one decorated with butterflies that Rachel had bought 3 summers ago, before the cancer, before everything changed. The nurse handed him a prescription refill with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and Marcus added it to the collection in his wallet. 6 different medications, 4 times a day, a routine he could perform in his sleep. The October air hit them as they left the building, crisp with a promise of winter. Marcus adjusted his jacket, still wearing his work clothes from the construction site. Concrete dust on his jeans, the smell of metal and sweat. He'd left early to make the appointment, would lose half a day's pay, but Sophie's health didn't run on a convenient schedule. "Can we get pizza?" Her voice was small against the wind. Marcus looked down at his daughter, at the exhaustion in her dark eyes, and felt the familiar calculation running through his head. Pizza meant $20 he'd planned to put toward next week's rent. But it was their tradition. After every hospital visit, something good to wash away the antiseptic smell and fluorescent lighting. "We can get whatever you want. Pizza, ice cream, both if you're hungry." Sophie managed a tired smile. "Both. That's my girl." They walked in comfortable silence, Marcus keeping her on his left side, away from the street. The riverside walkway stretched ahead, nearly empty in the late afternoon. During summer, it would be crowded with joggers and families, but now, with evening settling in and the temperature dropping, they had it mostly to themselves. The Raven River moved fast beside them, swollen from recent rains upstream. Marcus could hear it rushing past, aggressive and dark, pushing against the concrete embankment with relentless force. He'd lived in Ravenport long enough to respect that water, long enough to know it killed at least 2 people every year, usually kids who thought they could swim it, or drunks who wandered too close. They passed under the old railway bridge, and Marcus was mentally calculating whether he had enough cash for pizza and ice cream, or if he'd need to stop at an ATM when Sophie suddenly stopped walking. "Daddy, look!" He followed her gaze. About 50 yards ahead, near one of the ornamental benches that overlooked the river, a figure stood at the railing. Even from this distance, Marcus could tell something was wrong. The woman, he could see now it was a woman, was leaning too far forward. Her posture suggested either exhaustion or something darker. "Stay close to me." They continued walking, and details emerged. The woman wore business attire, a charcoal gray suit that looked expensive even from a distance. Her dark hair was pulled back in a style that suggested boardrooms and power lunches, but her hands gripped the railing with white-knuckled intensity, and her shoulders shook in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. Marcus slowed their pace, uncertain. He'd lived in the city long enough to know when to mind his own business, but something about the woman's posture, the desperate way she clutched that railing, set off alarms in his head. Alarms that sounded like the monitor beside Rachel's hospital bed 3 years ago. That flat tone that meant everything was ending. "Miss?" He kept his voice gentle. "Are you okay?" The woman's head turned slightly, but she didn't look at him. In profile, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, maybe early 30s, with sharp features and the kind of bone structure that belonged in magazines. But her expression was hollow, like someone who'd forgotten how to feel anything at all. "I'm fine." Her voice was flat, unconvincing. "Please keep walking." Marcus hesitated. Sophie pressed closer to his leg, sensing the tension. He should listen to the woman, should take his daughter and continue home, let whatever this was resolve itself without his interference. But something in that hollow voice reminded him of the worst days after Sarah died, that flat affect that came when pain went so deep that emotion became impossible. "Maya, sweetheart, can you sit on that bench over there for just a minute?" He pointed to a bench about 20 feet back, well away from the railing and the water and whatever was happening here. "But Daddy..." "Please, baby, just for a minute." Sophie looked up at him with knowing eyes that saw too much, understood too much for a 7-year-old. She'd found her grandmother dead in bed 2 years ago, had learned early that adults didn't always come back. She nodded slowly and walked to the bench, her small form looking even smaller against the darkening sky. Marcus approached the woman carefully, the way you'd approach something wild and wounded. He stopped about 10 feet away, close enough to reach her if needed, far enough not to spook her. "I don't mean to intrude." His hands stayed visible, non-threatening. "But I've got a daughter sitting right over there, and if something happens to you, she's going to see it. So I'm asking, whatever you're thinking about doing, can we talk about it first?" The woman's laugh was bitter and sharp. "You think I'm going to jump? I think you're standing too close to a river that's moving fast enough to kill you, and you look like someone who's forgotten why she shouldn't." For the first time, the woman actually looked at him. Her eyes were striking, a gray blue that reminded him of storm clouds, but they held a kind of exhausted anger that made him take an involuntary step back. "You don't know anything about me." "You're right, I don't. But I know what loss looks like. I know what it feels like when the world gets so heavy you can't remember why you're still carrying it." Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the facade. "Your daughter." Her gaze flicked toward Sophie on the bench. "Is she sick?" The question caught him off guard. "How did you—" "Hospital bracelet." The woman gestured weakly. "I can see it from here. Ravenport Children's. I've donated enough money to that place to recognize their wristbands." Marcus glanced back at Sophie, who was watching them with concerned eyes. The pink hospital bracelet stood out against her dark jacket. "She has a heart condition." The words still difficult, even after years of saying them. "We're managing it. Today was just a checkup." "And the mother?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Gone 3 years ago. Cancer." The woman's expression softened slightly, some of the hardness leaving her eyes. "I'm sorry." Yeah, me too. He took another step closer, his work boots scraping concrete. Look, I don't know what brought you here tonight, and you don't have to tell me. But that river doesn't care about your reasons. It's not going to solve anything. It's just going to be cold and dark and final. The woman looked back at the rushing water. Maybe that's exactly what I need. Is it? Marcus kept his voice steady. Or is it just the easiest option left? You think this is easy? Her voice cracked, anger and pain bleeding through. You think I haven't tried everything else first? Then try one more thing. Step back from that railing and tell me your name. The woman stared at him, and for a moment Marcus thought she might actually do it, might actually step back and let whatever madness had brought her here dissolve into the October evening. Instead, she let go of the railing. It happened so fast that Marcus barely had time to process. One moment, the woman was standing there, backlit by the city lights across the river. The next, she'd simply released her grip and let gravity do the rest. No! The shout tore from Marcus's throat as the woman toppled backward over the railing. He didn't think, didn't calculate the risk or consider his daughter watching from the bench. His body simply moved. Years of construction work and physical labor translating into pure reaction. He vaulted over the railing, his hands barely catching the metal as he launched himself toward the water. The image of Sophie's face, mouth open in a silent scream, burned into his vision for one terrible second. The river hit him like a fist. Cold so intense it felt like burning, water forcing itself into his nose and mouth before he could catch his breath. The current grabbed him immediately, stronger than he'd imagined, pulling him under and spinning him like a toy in a bathtub. He broke the surface, gasping, his eyes burning from whatever chemicals and runoff the river carried. Maya! He tried to shout, but water filled his mouth. Then he saw the woman, already 10 feet downstream, her dark suit making her almost invisible against the water. Her head went under, came back up, went under again. Marcus kicked hard, fighting the current, his work boots feeling like anchors. The river wanted to pull him one direction, but he angled across it, using the flow to help carry him toward the drowning woman. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but he'd hauled lumber and drywall for 15 years, and his body knew how to push past pain. His hand caught fabric, the woman's jacket. She thrashed, panicked now, her earlier resignation replaced by survival instinct. Her elbow caught him in the jaw. Stars exploded across his vision. Stop fighting! He spat water, trying to get his arm around her. I've got you! But she couldn't stop, couldn't hear him over the roar of the river and her own terror. Her weight pulled them both under. In the dark water, Marcus locked his arm around her chest, pinning her arms, the way he'd been taught in a lifeguard training course 20 years ago. Muscle memory took over. Kick, pull, keep her head above water. Don't let go. The river carried them downstream, but Marcus angled toward the far bank where the current eddied near an old dock. His free arm reached out, fingers scraping concrete, missing, reaching again. The woman had gone limp, either unconscious or too exhausted to fight anymore. His hand caught a metal ladder built into the embankment. Pain shot through his shoulder as his arm took both their weights, the current trying to tear them away. He held on, muscles trembling, and pulled them toward the ladder 1 agonizing inch at a time. Getting the woman onto the ladder took everything he had left. He pushed her up from below, her dead weight nearly pulling him back into the water. His arm shook. His shoulder felt like it was being ripped from the socket. but the image of Sophie's terrified face kept him moving. One more push. One more pull. He got the woman high enough to drape over the concrete edge, then hauled himself up after her, every muscle protesting. They collapsed on the walkway, both of them coughing water, shaking from cold and shock. Marcus's entire body felt like it had been beaten with hammers. His clothes clung to him, heavy and freezing, and every breath hurt. The woman rolled onto her side, retching water onto the concrete. Her perfect hair had come loose, plastered across her face. The expensive suit was ruined, torn at the shoulder, covered in river filth. "What the hell were you thinking?" she gasped when she could speak. "You could have died." Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that hurt his raw throat. "Me? You're the one who jumped into a goddamn river." "I didn't jump." She pushed herself up on shaking arms. "I slipped. I was looking at the water and my hand slipped." She stopped, her face crumpling. Oh God, I'm so stupid." She wasn't crying. She was shaking too hard for tears, her whole body convulsing with cold and shock and whatever had brought her to that railing in the first place. Marcus looked back across the river, his heart suddenly seizing with panic. Sophie. He could see her, still on the bench where he'd left her, standing now, her small hands pressed against her mouth. Even from this distance, he could see the terror on her face. "I have to get back to my daughter." He tried to stand. His legs nearly gave out. The woman grabbed his arm. "Wait, you're hypothermic. We both are. You need—" She pulled out a phone from somewhere. Miraculously, it still worked. She dialed with shaking fingers, her voice suddenly sharp and commanding. "This is Victoria Harrison. I need a car at the Riverside Dock, East Bank, near the railway bridge. Immediately." She paused, listening. "And call Ravenport Children's Hospital. Tell them we're bringing in a potential hypothermia case." She looked at Marcus. "Your daughter's name?" "Sophie Reed. But she's not. Better safe than sorry." Victoria spoke into the phone again. "Sophie Reed, age 7, cardiac patient. We're coming in." She ended the call and looked at Marcus with new focus. "How long were you in the water?" "I don't know, a minute, 2. Long enough." She was already moving, pulling off her ruined jacket and wrapping it around his shoulders. It didn't help much, but the gesture registered through his shock. "Can you walk?" "I have to get to Sophie. There's a pedestrian bridge 100 yards that way. Can you make it?" Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. They started moving, supporting each other, two strangers bound together by catastrophe. The walk to the bridge felt endless. Every step sent fresh waves of cold through Marcus's body. His teeth chattered so hard he bit his tongue. Beside him, Victoria Harrison moved with grim determination, her arm locked through his, keeping him upright when his legs wanted to fold. "Almost there." She kept saying it like a mantra. "Just a little further." When they finally reached the bridge and crossed back to the West Bank, Sophie was waiting. She launched herself at Marcus, wrapping her small arms around his waist and sobbing into his soaked shirt. "Daddy, I thought you died. I thought you both died." "I'm okay, sweetheart," Marcus managed through chattering teeth. "I'm okay." But Sophie wouldn't let go, and Marcus couldn't blame her. He'd jumped into a river and left her alone on a bench while he saved a stranger. What kind of father did that? A black car pulled up, sleek and expensive, with a driver who looked unsurprised to find his employer soaking wet and covered in river filth. Victoria opened the back door. "Get in, both of you." Marcus wanted to refuse, wanted to tell this stranger that he didn't need her help, that he and Sophie would be fine getting home on their own. But his body was shutting down from the cold, and Sophie was shaking against him, and the hospital was 15 minutes away by foot. They got in the car. The driver had the heat running full blast. Victoria pulled emergency blankets from somewhere. Of course, this car had emergency blankets, but her makeup was smeared, her hair was a disaster, and something in her eyes looked absolutely shattered. "Thank you." Her voice was quiet, almost lost under the sound of the heater. "You already said that. I mean it. She stopped, her perfect composure cracking. "I don't know what I was doing there. I honestly don't remember deciding to go to the river. I just found myself there, and everything felt so heavy. And when I looked at the water, it seemed quieter than everything else." Marcus knew exactly what she meant. He'd stood in Sophie's hospital room 3 years ago, watching machines breathe for her, while the doctors explained that her mother was gone. And he'd felt that same terrible quiet calling to him. The promise that if he just stopped fighting, stopped trying, stopped carrying the weight, everything would finally be still. "What changed?" he asked. Victoria looked at Sophie, still pressed against her father's side. "I saw your daughter's face when you jumped in after me. I saw how terrified she was, and I realized," her voice broke, "I realized I was about to do to you what losing someone does to the people left behind." The car pulled up to the hospital's emergency entrance. Medical staff were already waiting, clearly prepared by Victoria's call. They descended on Marcus and Sophie immediately, checking vitals, asking questions, ushering them inside with professional efficiency. In the chaos of warm blankets and heated IV fluids and concerned doctors, Marcus lost track of Victoria Harrison. One moment she was there, speaking quietly with a nurse. The next, she'd vanished like she'd never existed at all. Hours later, after they'd been checked and cleared and given stern lectures about hypothermia and risk, Marcus and Sophie sat in a private room. Someone had brought them dry clothes, expensive sweats that definitely hadn't come from the hospital's usual stock. A nurse explained that Ms. Harrison had arranged for the room and covered all the costs. "She left this for you." The nurse handed Marcus a business card. It was simple, elegant, expensive cardstock. Victoria Harrison, CEO, Harrison Technologies. A phone number, an email address, and on the back, written in precise handwriting, "Thank you for showing me that someone still cares if I drown. I owe you more than I can repay." Sophie was finally sleeping, curled up in the hospital bed with exhaustion that went bone deep. Marcus sat beside her, still feeling the river's cold in his bones, and stared at the business card. He should throw it away. Should take Sophie home, get back to their quiet life, forget this night ever happened. They didn't need complications, didn't need powerful strangers with their own demons getting tangled up in their already precarious existence. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Victoria Harrison's face in the car, that moment when her perfect mask had cracked and something real and broken had shown through. He put the card in his pocket. The nurse came back with discharge papers and a pharmacy bag. Miss Harrison also arranged for Sophie's prescriptions to be refilled for the next 6 months. She's quite generous. Yeah. Marcus thought about a woman who could arrange all this with a phone call, but had been standing at a railing looking for quiet in a river that had none. Generous. They took a taxi home, another gift from Victoria Harrison apparently, and Marcus carried Sophie up to their third-floor apartment. It was small, worn at the edges, but it was theirs. He tucked Sophie into bed, kissed her forehead, and stood in the doorway watching her sleep. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. "I'm guessing you made it home safely." Marcus hesitated, then typed back. "We did. Thank you for everything." The response came quickly. "I should be thanking you. You saved my life." Marcus stared at the screen, then wrote, "You slipped." A long pause, then, "Did I?" Those two words carried weight. Marcus sat down heavily on his worn couch, still wrapped in the expensive sweatshirt someone had provided. Outside, the rain had finally started, tapping against the windows like fingers asking to be let in. "What do you remember?" He watched the 3 dots appear, disappear, appear again. "I remember standing there for a long time. I remember thinking about how tired I was, how much everything hurt. I remember my hands getting cold on the railing. Then I remember the water." Marcus closed his eyes, thinking about all the decisions he hadn't made in the 3 years since Rachel died. All the mornings he'd gotten up because Sophie needed him, not because he wanted to. All the days he'd survived, not through any active choice, but simply through the absence of deciding not to. Maybe surviving doesn't always look like a decision. Maybe sometimes it's just not choosing the alternative. That's a depressing way to live. Yeah, but it's still living. The dots appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, "I need to see you again. Not to repay you, not out of obligation. I need to understand what happened tonight. Can we meet tomorrow?" Every instinct told Marcus to say no, to protect the fragile peace he'd built for himself and Sophie, to avoid complications and powerful strangers and whatever chaos came with women who stood at railings and let go. But he remembered the look in her eyes when she'd seen Sophie's face, the way her voice had broken when she talked about being tired, the honesty in those 2 words. "Did I?" "Coffee," he typed. "Somewhere public. I'll bring Sophie." The response was immediate. "The Riverside Cafe, noon." Marcus almost laughed at the location. "You want to go back to the river?" "I need to. If I'm going to figure out whether I slipped or jumped, I need to go back to where it happened." "Fair enough. Noon." He put his phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked city. Somewhere out there, Victoria Harrison was in her penthouse or mansion or whatever accommodations came with being a CEO. Somewhere out there, the Raven River kept rushing past, dark and relentless, and indifferent to the people it almost claimed. And somewhere inside his chest, beneath the bruises and the cold that still hadn't completely left, something small and dangerous was starting to wake up, a feeling he'd thought died with Rachel. A sense that maybe, just maybe, his carefully controlled life was about to become uncontrollable. He should be terrified, should be planning how to extricate himself before things got complicated. Instead, he found himself thinking about gray-blue eyes and a voice that asked, "Did I?" like the answer mattered more than anything in the world. Behind him, Sophie stirred in her sleep, making the small sounds she always made when her dreams turned restless. Marcus went to her immediately, sitting on the edge of her bed, stroking her hair until she settled. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're okay." But as he sat there in the dark, listening to his daughter's breathing and the rain against the windows, Marcus Carter wondered if that was true. If they really were okay. Or if tonight had cracked something open that couldn't be sealed shut again. In his pocket, Victoria Harrison's business card felt heavy as stone. The rain kept falling, the river kept flowing, And somewhere between survival and surrender, two broken people had collided in a way that might save them both or destroy what little they had left. Marcus didn't know which it would be. But tomorrow at noon, he was going to find out. The morning came too quickly, dragging Marcus from restless sleep filled with dark water and hands slipping through his grasp. He woke to find Sophie already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed and staring at him with those knowing eyes that saw too much. "You were making noises again, like you did after Mommy died." Marcus sat up, his entire body protesting. Every muscle ached from fighting the river, and his shoulder throbbed where he'd caught the ladder. "Just bad dreams, sweetheart. I'm fine." "Are we really going to meet the lady from the river?" So she'd heard his phone conversation, or at least guessed enough to piece it together. Sophie had always been too perceptive for her own good, reading situations and emotions with an accuracy that sometimes frightened him. "Just for coffee." He tried to make it sound casual. "She wants to say thank you properly." She was going to jump, wasn't she? The directness of the question stopped him cold. "Sophie, I'm not stupid, Daddy. I know what it looks like when someone doesn't want to be alive anymore." Her voice was small but steady, and it broke his heart. Grandma looked like that before she went to sleep and didn't wake up. Marcus moved to sit beside her, pulling her into his lap even though she was getting too big for it. Rachel's mother had died when Sophie was 5, slipping away quietly one night after years of grief over losing her daughter. Sophie had been the one to find her the next morning. "Sometimes people get lost." He chose his words carefully. "They forget how to find their way back to the things that matter. That doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means they're hurting." "Is she still hurting?" "I don't know. That's part of why we're meeting her, to make sure she's okay." Sophie was quiet for a moment, her small fingers tracing the bruises forming on his forearms. "You jumped in after her, even though you don't swim very well." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Yeah, I did." "You could have died and left me alone." There it was. The thing they both had been thinking since last night, but hadn't said aloud. Marcus had risked everything. His life, Sophie's security, their entire fragile existence, for a stranger. "I know. I'm sorry I scared you." "Don't be sorry." Sophie looked up at him with fierce eyes. "Mommy always said you had a hero's heart. She said it was one of the things she loved most about you, even when it scared her." Marcus felt his vision blur. Rachel had said that, usually right before yelling at him for doing something reckless on a construction site or stopping to help someone on the side of the road when they were already late. But Mommy also said, Sophie's voice dropped to almost a whisper, that heroes have to remember they're someone's whole world too, and that I needed you more than anyone else ever could. "You do." Marcus held her tighter. "You're my whole world, Sophie. Everything I do, it's all for you." "I know. That's why I'm glad you saved her. Because if you just walked by and she died, it would have hurt you. And when you hurt, I hurt too." The wisdom in those words coming from a 7-year-old who'd already lost too much nearly undid him. He pressed his face into her hair, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, trying not to think about how fragile this all was. "So we'll go meet her." Sophie's tone turned decisive. "And we'll make sure she's not lost anymore." "Okay." They got ready slowly, Marcus moving like an old man as his battered body reminded him of every second in that river. He made Sophie's favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes that were definitely not on her cardiac diet, but he couldn't bring himself to deny her this morning. At 11:30, they left the apartment. Marcus had dressed in his best jeans and a button-down shirt that only had one small stain near the collar. Sophie wore her favorite purple dress and the small butterfly necklace that had been Rachel's. She insisted on wearing it whenever something felt important. The walk to Riverside Cafe took 20 minutes, and every step closer made Marcus's anxiety spike higher. What was he doing? Meeting a woman who'd almost died last night, who ran some technology company he'd never heard of, who lived in a world so far removed from his that they might as well be different species. The cafe sat right on the riverbank with outdoor seating that overlooked the water. In daylight, the Raven River looked almost peaceful, its surface glittering in the autumn sun, giving no indication of the violence lurking beneath. Marcus felt his stomach turn looking at it. "There she is," Sophie pointed. Victoria Harrison sat at a corner table on the patio, her back to the river, as if she couldn't quite bring herself to look at it. She wore casual clothes, expensive casual, the kind of jeans and sweater that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Without the business suit and severe styling, she looked younger, more vulnerable. But there were shadows under her eyes that suggested she'd slept about as well as Marcus had. She saw them approaching and stood, her movements uncertain, like someone who'd forgotten how to navigate a simple social interaction. Marcus. Then she looked down at Sophie. "And you must be Sophie. I'm Victoria." Sophie studied her with that unnerving directness children sometimes had. "Are you feeling better?" Victoria blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct question. Yes, I think so. Thank you for asking." "Good, because Daddy was really worried about you. He had nightmares." "Sophie," Marcus started, mortified. But Victoria's expression softened. "I had nightmares too. I think we all did." She gestured to the table. "Please, sit. I ordered some things, but I wasn't sure what you'd like." The table held an absurd amount of food, pastries, sandwiches, fruit, several different types of juice, and at least 3 kinds of coffee. It was the spread of someone who had no idea what normal people ate, but had money to cover all possibilities. Sophie's eyes went wide. "Can I have a cinnamon roll?" "You can have whatever you want." There was something almost desperate in Victoria's voice, like feeding this child might somehow make up for what she'd almost done last night. They settled into their seats, and for a few minutes there was blessed distraction in the business of eating. Sophie methodically worked through her cinnamon roll, while Victoria spoke suddenly, "To the railing where it happened." Marcus set down his coffee cup. "I stood there for 45 minutes, trying to remember exactly what I was thinking when I let go." She paused, her fingers wrapping around her own cup with white-knuckled intensity. "I still don't remember deciding to fall, but I remembered what brought me there." Sophie had stopped eating and was watching Victoria with solemn attention. Marcus should probably shield her from this conversation, but something told him his daughter needed to hear it as much as he did. "What brought you there?" "Everything. Nothing. The accumulation of 1,000 small moments when I realized I'd built a life that looked perfect from the outside, but felt completely empty inside." Victoria looked directly at Marcus. "Do you know what it's like to have everything you're supposed to want and still feel like you're suffocating?" "No," Marcus was honest. "I know what it's like to have nothing but the one thing that matters and be terrified every day that you'll lose it too." His hand had unconsciously moved to Sophie's shoulder. Victoria tracked the movement, something unreadable crossing her face. I spent 15 years building Harrison Technologies, sacrificed everything for it. Relationships, health, any semblance of a normal life. I told myself it was worth it, that success would fill whatever was missing. She paused. Yesterday I closed a deal worth $800 million, and when I was done, when everyone was celebrating, all I could think was, is this it? Is this what I gave up everything for? What did you give up? Sophie's voice was small but clear. Victoria looked at her, and Marcus saw tears gathering in those gray-blue eyes. Everything that matters. I gave up the possibility of having what you have, a parent who would jump into a freezing river to save a stranger because it's the right thing to do. I gave up softness and vulnerability and the ability to let anyone close enough to actually hurt me. She wiped at her eyes impatiently. I built walls so high and so thick that I forgot how to climb over them. And yesterday, standing at that railing, I realized I'd locked myself in a prison of my own making. So you tried to escape? I don't know what I tried to do. Victoria's voice was raw. I just knew I couldn't keep going the way I was. Something had to break. She looked at Marcus directly. And then you showed up and pulled me out of the water and reminded me that there are still people in the world who care if a stranger drowns. Do you have any idea how rare that is? It's not rare. It's human. Most people would have done the same thing. No, they wouldn't have. Trust me. I've spent enough time in boardrooms and negotiations to know that most people's first instinct is to protect themselves, not to risk everything for someone they don't know. Maybe you've been spending time with the wrong people. Victoria smiled, but it was sad around the edges. Maybe I have. They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the cafe washing over them. Distant conversation, the hiss of the espresso machine, the river moving past with deceptive calm. Why did you want to meet today? Marcus finally asked. Really? Not just to say thank you? Victoria took a deep breath. Because last night, for maybe the first time in my adult life, I had a genuine human connection. When you were in that car, half frozen and exhausted, and you still made sure your daughter was okay before yourself. When you looked at me and didn't see a CEO or a success story, but just another person who was struggling. She stopped, composing herself. I've forgotten what that feels like, to be seen as a person instead of a position. I don't know anything about your position, Marcus pointed out. I'd never heard of Harrison Technologies before last night. I know. That's part of what makes this so strange and so important. You saved my life without knowing who I was or what I could do for you in return. You just saw someone who needed help. Sophie had finished her cinnamon roll and was now working on a blueberry muffin, but her attention never wavered from the conversation. I can't be your reminder that humanity exists. Marcus chose his words carefully. Sophie and I were barely keeping our own lives together. I work construction. I'm raising a daughter with a serious medical condition. Most days, I'm just trying to make it to bedtime without falling apart. I don't have the capacity to fix whatever's broken in your life. I'm not asking you to fix me. There was steel in Victoria's voice now, the CEO showing through the vulnerability. I'm asking for permission to figure out how to fix myself. And maybe while I do that, I could know you, really know you. Not as the man who saved my life, but as a friend. The word hung between them, both too simple and too complicated for what they were dancing around. I don't have friends, Marcus admitted. After Rachel died, everyone kind of drifted away. They didn't know what to say to me, and I didn't have energy for small talk. It's been just me and Sophie for 3 years. I don't have friends either. I have employees, business associates, people who want something from me. But friends? Victoria shook her head. I can't remember the last time someone asked me how I was doing and actually wanted to hear the answer. How are you doing? Sophie asked suddenly. Victoria looked at her, startled. What? How are you doing? Sophie repeated, enunciating each word carefully. Really? Not the thing you say to make people stop asking. Marcus watched Victoria's face cycle through several expressions: surprise, discomfort, something that might have been grief. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm tired. So tired that I don't remember what it feels like not to be exhausted. I'm lonely in a way that has nothing to do with being alone, and I'm scared that I've made so many wrong choices that I can't find my way back to who I was supposed to be. That's a better answer. Sophie was solemn. Thank you for being honest. Victoria let out a surprised laugh that turned into something dangerously close to a sob. You're 7 years old. How are you this wise? She's had to grow up too fast. Marcus felt the familiar guilt rising in his chest. Lost her mom too young. Watched her dad struggle to hold things together. Spent too much time in hospitals. Kids learn fast when they have to. I'm sorry. Victoria turned to Sophie. About your mother, and about your heart. That's not fair. Sophie shrugged with the practiced acceptance of a child who'd heard similar sentiments countless times. Lots of things aren't fair. But Daddy says we don't get to choose what happens to us, only how we respond to it. Your daddy sounds smart. He is. Sophie's loyalty was fierce, even if he doesn't always believe it himself. Marcus felt his face heat. Sophie, it's true. You always say you didn't go to college so you're not smart like Mommy was. But Mommy used to tell me that intelligence isn't just about books. She said you were the smartest person she knew about what really mattered. Marcus's vision blurred. He'd forgotten Rachel saying that. Or maybe he'd never fully believed it. His wife had been a paralegal, sharp and educated, while he'd barely graduated high school before going into construction. What did your wife say really mattered? Taking care of people, Sophie answered when Marcus couldn't find his voice. Being brave when it's hard. Showing up even when you're scared. Loving people more than you love being comfortable. She sounds like she was an amazing woman. She was, Marcus managed. She really was. They fell into silence again, but it felt different now. Less awkward, more contemplative, like three people learning how to be honest in a world that usually demanded performance. Can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Victoria leaned forward, her elbows on the table. Marcus nodded, and Sophie leaned in too, clearly invested. I built Harrison Technologies from nothing. Everyone thinks I'm this brilliant innovator, this fearless leader, but the truth is, I was running. She paused, her hand unconsciously moving to her left shoulder, hidden beneath her sweater. My parents died in a house fire when I was 12. I was the only one who made it out. I have scars from that night. Bad ones. And for years, every time I looked at them, all I could see was my failure to save the people I loved most. You were 12. Marcus kept his voice gentle. You were a child. I know that intellectually. But emotionally? Victoria shook her head. I've spent 20 years trying to prove that I deserve to have survived, working myself to exhaustion, building something meaningful, making sure my life counted for something since theirs were cut short. But no matter how successful I become, no matter how much I achieve, I still feel like I'm that terrified child crawling out of a burning house while my parents screamed. Sophie had gone very still, her eyes wide. Marcus reached across the table without thinking and put his hand over Victoria's. Survivor's guilt. I know what that looks like. After Rachel died, I spent months wondering why it was her instead of me. Why she got cancer when she was the good one, the smart one, the one who actually made the world better. I was just some construction worker who'd gotten lucky enough to marry way above his station. It should have been me. But then I'd be alone. Sophie's voice was small and fierce. And Mommy loved you too much to want that. I know, sweetheart. It took me a long time to understand that, to accept that surviving doesn't mean you have to justify your existence every single day. Victoria was staring at their joined hands like she'd forgotten what human touch felt like. Do you still feel it? The guilt? Every day. But I've learned to live with it. To understand that honoring Rachel's memory doesn't mean destroying myself. It means being the father she believed I could be. It means showing Sophie that life after loss is still worth living. How do you do that? Victoria's voice was raw with need. How do you keep going when everything feels pointless? Marcus looked at his daughter. You find something that matters more than the pain. For me, that's Sophie. Every morning, even when I don't want to get up, even when the weight of everything feels unbearable, I get up because she needs me. And in taking care of her, I somehow end up taking care of myself too. But I don't have that. I don't have anyone who needs me. I have a company, but companies don't love you back. I have employees, but they'd replace me in a heartbeat if it served their interests. I've built this enormous life, and at the center of it is just nothing. Then maybe it's time to build something different. Sophie's pronouncement had the weight of absolute certainty. Both adults looked at her. What do you mean? You said you gave up everything that matters. So start getting those things back. Make friends. Let people be close to you. Stop hiding behind your walls. It's not that simple. Why not? Sophie challenged. You're a grown-up. You can choose to change things. You're not stuck unless you decide to be stuck. Victoria let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. When did 7-year-olds become so wise? When they had to be. Marcus squeezed Victoria's hand before letting go. He'd held on too long, and his palm felt cold without hers beneath it. But Sophie's right. You're not trapped. You're just scared. And that's okay. Being scared doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human. I've forgotten how to be human. I've been a CEO for so long that I don't remember how to just be. Then learn. Start small. Have coffee with people who don't want anything from you except your company. Say yes when someone asks how you're doing and actually tell them the truth. Let yourself be imperfect. Victoria's smile was watery but genuine. Is that an invitation to have coffee again? Marcus knew he should say no, should protect the careful boundaries he'd built around his life, should keep this woman who carried catastrophe in her wake at arm's length. Yeah, I think it is. Can I come too? Sophie asked. I like her. You barely know me. I know you told the truth when I asked how you were doing. Most grown-ups lie about that. They say they're fine even when they're not, and it makes it hard to trust them. Sophie tilted her head, studying Victoria. You're sad and scared, but you're honest. That's better than being happy and lying about it. Victoria looked at Marcus with something like wonder. Is she always like this? Pretty much. Rachel used to joke that Sophie was born seeing through everyone's defenses. It's unsettling, but it keeps me honest. They finished their coffee while the conversation shifted to safer topics. Sophie's school, Marcus's current construction project, Victoria's admission that she hadn't taken a real vacation in 8 years. But beneath the surface pleasantries, something more substantial was forming. Not quite friendship yet, but the possibility of it. When they finally stood to leave, Victoria hesitated. "Can I ask you something personal? You've already told me about your parents dying and standing at a railing last night. I think we're past the point of worrying about what's too personal." Victoria smiled, but there was nervousness in it. "Would you let me take you both to dinner? Somewhere nice? Not as repayment," she added quickly, "as friends."
"If we're going to do this, I want to do it properly." Marcus's first instinct was to refuse. He didn't belong in fancy restaurants, didn't have clothes nice enough for wherever Victoria Harrison would consider somewhere nice. But then he looked at her face and saw not pity, but hope. Like she was offering not because she felt obligated, but because she genuinely wanted their company. "Somewhere that serves chicken fingers," Sophie interjected. "If we're going somewhere nice, they should have good chicken fingers." Victoria laughed, and it was the first time Marcus had heard genuine joy in the sound. "I'll make sure of it. Is Friday night okay? I'll pick you both up at 6. Marcus should ask for time to think about it, should put more distance between yesterday's catastrophe and whatever was developing between them. "Friday works." They exchanged phone numbers, and Victoria promised to text the details. As she turned to leave, she paused and looked back at Marcus. "Thank you. Not just for pulling me out of the river, for pulling me back into the world. I didn't realize how much I needed that. We all need it sometimes. The world's too hard to navigate alone." He watched her walk away, noticed how she moved with careful precision, like someone who'd forgotten how to take up space unselfconsciously. Then he felt Sophie's hand slip into his. "I like her. She's broken like us."
"We're not broken, sweetheart."
"Yeah, we are. But that's okay.
Broken things can still be beautiful. Mommy used to say that." Marcus's chest tightened. Rachel had said that, usually while holding some piece of broken pottery or stained glass she'd found at a thrift store. She'd collect damaged, beautiful things and display them like treasures, insisting that fractures added character. You're right. Broken things can still be beautiful. They walked home slowly, Sophie chattering about the cinnamon rolls and asking questions about what somewhere nice meant for dinner on Friday. Marcus let her talk, his mind still back at that table, replaying everything Victoria had said. He'd meant what he told her. He couldn't fix her. He was barely holding his own life together. But maybe that was the point. Maybe two people who were barely surviving alone could somehow hold each other up. Or maybe they'd both drown. His phone buzzed as they climbed the stairs to their apartment. A text from Victoria. "Thank you for being honest today. It meant a lot." Marcus smiled and typed back, "Thank you for seeing me as a person instead of a position. I'd forgotten what that felt like." Her response came quickly. "Same. I'll text you Friday details." "And Marcus, I'm scared. About all of this." He stared at those words, then wrote, "Good. That means you care about it. Fear means it matters. Does it get easier? Letting people in after you've lost everyone who mattered?"
Marcus thought about that question seriously as he unlocked their apartment door. No. But it gets more worth it.
The risk starts feeling less terrifying than the alternative. What's the alternative? He thought about standing at that railing last night, watching Victoria let go. Thought about the days after Rachel's funeral, when he'd moved through the world like a ghost, physically present but emotionally absent. Thought about all the ways a person could be alive and still not be living. Drowning on dry land, going through the motions but never really feeling anything. That's the alternative. The three dots appeared and disappeared several times before Victoria's response came through. Then I guess we'd better learn to swim. Marcus set his phone down and leaned back against the couch, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical fatigue. In the next room, he could hear Sophie humming while she drew, her voice carrying a melody Rachel used to sing. Outside, the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere across the city, Victoria Harrison was probably back in her world of technology and power, trying to reconcile the person she'd been yesterday with whoever she was becoming today. And here in this small apartment, Marcus Reed was doing the same thing, trying to figure out how a chance encounter at a railing had cracked open a life he'd thought was sealed shut. He didn't have answers, didn't know if Friday's dinner would be the beginning of something meaningful or just another awkward attempt at connection that would fizzle out. But for the first time in 3 years, he found himself looking forward to something that wasn't directly related to keeping Sophie alive and healthy. Found himself curious about another person in a way that felt dangerous and exciting and terrifying all at once. Maybe that was enough. Maybe curiosity was where connection started. His phone buzzed one more time. Sleep well, Marcus, and thank you for not letting me drown in more ways than one. He smiled and typed back, Sleep well, Victoria. See you Friday. Then he got up to check on Sophie, to make dinner, to continue the quiet routine that made up their lives. But something had shifted. The routine felt less like survival and more like living. And in the spaces between cooking and cleanup, between helping with homework and tucking his daughter into bed, Marcus let himself imagine what Friday might bring. Let himself hope that maybe, just maybe, saving a stranger's life had also started saving his own. The night settled over Ravenport and the river kept flowing, dark and endless. But inside apartment 3C, where a widowed father and his brave daughter were learning to live again, there was warmth and light, and the fragile beginning of something new. Friday arrived with the kind of anxiety that made Marcus's hands shake while he tried to button his one decent shirt. He bought it for Rachel's funeral and hadn't worn it since. Now, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, he could barely recognize the man staring back at him. 3 years of grief and exhaustion had carved lines into his face that made him look older than 32. You look nice, Daddy. Sophie stood in the doorway, already dressed in the navy blue dress they'd picked out together earlier that week. Her hair was brushed until it shone, the butterfly necklace at her throat catching the light. You look beautiful. Marcus abandoned the shirt buttons to crouch down to her level. But you know this is just dinner, right? This isn't anything more than friends having a meal together. Sophie gave him that look, the one that said she saw right through his careful words to the nervousness underneath. It's okay to be scared, Daddy. You told Victoria that being scared means it matters. Too smart for your own good. He muttered it, but pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and letting her steadiness calm his racing heart. The knock came at exactly 6. Marcus opened the door to find Victoria standing in the hallway, and for a moment he forgot how to breathe. She wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than his monthly rent, her hair loose around her shoulders in a way he hadn't seen before. But what struck him most was her face. She looked nervous, genuinely anxious, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Hi." Her voice was uncertain in a way that made his own anxiety ease slightly. At least he wasn't the only one terrified. "Hi," he managed. "You look... wow. You clean up pretty well yourself." A small smile touched her lips. Then she looked past him to Sophie. "And you look absolutely gorgeous, Sophie. Is that a new dress?" Sophie beamed and did a little spin. "Daddy let me pick it out special. It has pockets." "The best dresses always have pockets," Victoria agreed solemnly. "Are you ready to go?" The car waiting outside was the same one from the hospital night, sleek and black with the same unflappable driver. Marcus helped Sophie into the back seat, hyper-aware of how out of place they must look climbing into a vehicle that probably cost more than he'd make in 5 years. "Where are we going?" "A place called Riverside House. I called ahead to make sure they have excellent chicken fingers. The chef assured me they're the best in the city." "You really called about chicken fingers?" "I did. And about making sure the atmosphere isn't too formal or stuffy. I want tonight to be comfortable, not intimidating." The thoughtfulness of it caught Marcus off guard. He'd been bracing himself for some upscale restaurant where he'd have to navigate multiple forks and feel everyone's eyes on him, silently judging the construction worker who didn't belong. Riverside House turned out to be exactly as advertised. Elegant but warm, with exposed brick walls and soft lighting that made everything feel intimate without being pretentious. The hostess greeted Victoria by name and led them to a private corner table that overlooked the river through large windows. Marcus's stomach clenched looking at the water, dark and relentless even in the city lights. "I specifically requested this table." Victoria noticed his reaction and touched his arm gently. "I need to stop being afraid of it. The river isn't my enemy. My own mind is." "That's very philosophical for someone who almost drowned in it." "Someone very smart told me that fear means it matters. So I'm trying to face the things that scare me instead of running from them." They settled into their seats and a waiter appeared with menus and sparkling water that probably cost more than Marcus's usual tap. Sophie studied her menu with intense concentration, her lips moving as she sounded out the words. "Can I really get anything?" She looked up at Victoria with wide eyes. "Anything you want, though I have it on good authority that the chicken fingers are exceptional." "With French fries?" "With whatever you'd like." Sophie grinned and announced to the waiter with perfect seriousness that she would have the chicken fingers with French fries, and could she please have extra ketchup? The waiter, who probably served senators and celebrities regularly, treated her request with the same grave consideration he'd give a wine order, promising the finest ketchup the establishment had to offer. After they'd all ordered, Marcus choosing the least expensive entree he could find, despite Victoria's insistence that price didn't matter, an awkward silence settled over the table. They'd been so honest at the cafe, but here in this beautiful restaurant, with the river flowing past and the weight of the week between them, words felt harder to find. "I have to tell you something about what happened after we met on Tuesday." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Okay." "The media found out about the river. Someone must have seen us at the hospital, or maybe one of the staff leaked it, I don't know. But Wednesday morning, there were reporters camped outside my building asking if it was true that I'd attempted suicide." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing at first. I had my PR team issue a statement saying it was a private medical matter and asking for respect. Victoria's laugh was bitter. But that just made them dig harder. By Thursday, they'd found witnesses who saw you jump in after me. Started calling you a hero, speculating about who you were and why you'd risked your life for a stranger. I'm not a hero. I just did what anyone would do. But that's not true, and you know it. Most people would have called 911 and hoped for the best. You jumped into a freezing river without hesitation. Victoria paused, her eyes meeting his. I wanted to tell you before you saw it yourself. There are articles about us, pictures someone took at the hospital. Your name is out there now. Marcus felt cold, despite the warmth of the restaurant. Pictures of Sophie? No. Victoria was quick to reassure. I made sure of that. Threatened legal action against any outlet that published images of a minor. But you? They have your name, where you work, speculation about your relationship to me. What kind of speculation? Victoria's cheeks colored slightly. The kind that sells papers. Secret relationship, affair gone wrong, that sort of nonsense. I'm sorry. I never meant for you to get dragged into my mess. Marcus sat back, processing. He'd lived quietly for 3 years, deliberately staying under the radar, keeping his world small and manageable. Now strangers were writing about him, making up stories, invading the careful privacy he'd built. Are you mad? There was real fear in Victoria's voice. I don't know. I'm processing. This is a lot. I can make it stop. I can issue a statement, clarify everything, make it clear you're just a good Samaritan who happened to be in the right place at the right time. I can shut down the speculation. Can you? Or will that just make them more curious? Victoria deflated slightly. You're probably right. Denying it will just fuel more stories. So we ignore it. Marcus surprised himself with his own certainty. Let them write whatever they want. People who know me will know the truth. The rest doesn't matter. You're taking this remarkably well. I'm terrified. But I'm also learning that running from scary things doesn't make them less scary. Just makes you tired. Sophie had been unusually quiet, listening to the adults with that intense focus she got when processing important information. Now she spoke up, her voice small but clear. Are people going to be mean to Daddy because of you? The directness of the question made Victoria flinch. I hope not, but yes, probably some people will. I'm sorry, Sophie. That's not fair to either of you. It's okay. Though her face suggested it wasn't entirely okay. Daddy says we can't control what other people do, only how we respond. And we respond with dignity and kindness, even when people don't deserve it. Your mother taught her that. Rachel believed that grace under pressure was the truest measure of character. She sounds like she was an incredible woman. She was. She would have liked you. I think Rachel had a soft spot for people who were hurting and trying to hide it. She could always see through the armor to the person underneath. Their food arrived, providing welcome distraction from the heavy conversation. Sophie dove into her chicken fingers with enthusiasm, pronouncing them indeed the best in the city. Marcus's steak was perfectly cooked, and he tried not to think about how much this single meal probably cost. Can I ask you something? Victoria spoke after they'd been eating in comfortable silence for a few minutes. About Rachel? You've mentioned her several times, but I don't want to pry if it's too painful. It's always painful. But that doesn't mean I don't want to talk about her. What do you want to know? How did you meet? Marcus smiled. the memory still warm despite the years and grief. Construction site. I was working on a renovation of a law office building, and she was a paralegal at one of the firms. She came down to complain about the noise disrupting their work, and I was covered in drywall dust and probably smelled terrible. I tried to explain that we were on a schedule and couldn't just stop. She threatened to file a formal complaint with my supervisor. That doesn't sound romantic. It wasn't. Not at first. Your mother was furious, and I was stubborn.
We argued for 10 minutes before my boss intervened and worked out a compromise. But the next day, Rachel came back with coffee and donuts for the whole crew and apologized for being harsh. Said she'd been stressed about a case and took it out on us. And you fell in love with her because of donuts? Victoria asked with a smile. I fell in love with her because she could admit when she was wrong. Because she saw us as people worth apologizing to, not just workers to be managed. And because when I thanked her, she looked at me like I was interesting instead of invisible. Marcus hadn't talked about this in years, hadn't let himself remember the good parts because they made the loss hurt more. But sitting here with Victoria and Sophie, it felt safe to remember. I asked her out that day, and she said no. Said she didn't date guys from work sites because it always ended badly. So I waited until the job was done, 3 months later, then showed up at her office with flowers and asked again. She said yes that time. Was she sick for a long time? Before she passed? 18 months from diagnosis to the end. Ovarian cancer, caught too late. She fought hard, did every treatment, never gave up hope. But sometimes fighting isn't enough. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. The worst part was watching her worry more about us than herself. Even when she could barely stand up, she was making me promise I'd take care of Sophie. Making me swear I wouldn't shut down after she was gone. But you did shut down. It wasn't a judgment, just an observation. Yeah, for a while I did. Kept Sophie alive and healthy, but emotionally I was barely present, just going through the motions. It took almost a year before I could feel anything besides grief and terror. He looked at his daughter, who was watching him with sad but understanding eyes. I'm sorry for that, sweetheart. For all the times I was there but not really there. You were grieving. Mommy told me before she died that you'd need time to find yourself again. She said to be patient with you. Marcus's eyes burned. She said that to you? Sophie nodded. Lots of things. She knew she was dying even when the doctors said there was still hope. She wrote me letters for when I'm older, and she made me promise to take care of you like you take care of me. You were 5 years old. She shouldn't have put that on you. She didn't put it on me. She trusted me. There's a difference. Sophie took another chicken finger, somehow managing to be both profound and completely childlike in the same breath. Victoria had tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry for both of you. For all you've lost. We're sorry for you too. Losing your parents in a fire is really scary. Marcus realized his daughter was referring to the confession from the cafe. I shouldn't have shared that with you. You're too young to carry that kind of burden. I'm too young for lots of things, but I'd rather know the truth than have adults lie to protect me. Lies make you feel crazy. Truth makes you feel trusted. Victoria looked at Marcus with something like awe. Is she always this insightful? Always. It's both a blessing and exhausting. They finished their meal while the conversation turned to lighter topics. Sophie's school, her favorite subjects, the chapter book she was reading about a girl who could talk to animals. Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions and engaging with Sophie's rambling stories like they mattered.
When dessert came, chocolate cake for Sophie, creme brulee for Victoria, and coffee for Marcus, the atmosphere had shifted into something comfortable and warm. The nervousness from earlier had dissolved, replaced by the easy familiarity of people who'd seen each other at their worst and chosen to stay anyway. "I have a confession," Victoria spoke as they were finishing dessert. "Today was supposed to be a board meeting, a crucial one about a merger that could reshape the entire company. I canceled it to be here." Marcus set down his coffee cup. "Victoria, if this was important, it was important. But so is this." She gestured between them. "I've spent 15 years prioritizing work over everything else, missing birthdays, holidays, any chance at a personal life because there was always another deal, another meeting, another crisis that demanded my attention. And Wednesday, standing at that railing, I realized that none of it mattered. Not really. All that success, all those achievements, and I was still completely alone." "You're not alone anymore." Sophie's statement was simple, matter of fact. Victoria agreed, her voice soft. "I'm not. And that terrifies me more than any boardroom ever has." "Why?" "Because work I understand. I know the rules, know how to win, know how to protect myself. But this?" She looked between Marcus and Sophie. "Friendship? Connection? Letting people matter to me? I don't have rules for that. I don't know how to do it without getting hurt." "You can't. That's the thing about caring about people. It always comes with the risk of pain. But the alternative is what you were doing Tuesday night. Standing at a railing because success without connection is just another form of drowning." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of her dessert plate. "There's something else I need to tell you. Something that happened yesterday." The seriousness in her tone made Marcus tense. "Okay." "My board found out about the river incident. Not from the media. From someone at the hospital who recognized me. They called an emergency meeting to discuss whether I'm fit to continue as CEO." "What?" Marcus's voice came out sharper than intended. "They can't. They can. They have a duty to shareholders to ensure leadership stability." Mental health concerns, potential liability, bad publicity. They had legitimate reasons to question my capacity. Victoria's smile was tight. "I walked into that boardroom yesterday knowing I might walk out unemployed." "What happened?" Sophie asked, her dessert forgotten. "I told them the truth. All of it. About my parents dying. About building the company as a way to justify my survival. About working myself into the ground because stopping meant feeling everything I'd been running from. About standing at that railing and realizing I'd built a prison instead of a life." "What did they say?" "Most of them wanted me out immediately, said I was unstable, a risk, that the company needed steady leadership. But then Robert Mitchell, he's been on the board since the beginning, he asked if anyone else in that room had ever felt like giving up. Asked if working yourself to exhaustion was really that different from what I'd contemplated doing." Victoria's hands were shaking now, and without thinking, Marcus reached across the table and took one of them in his. She held on, like he was the only thing keeping her anchored. 3 other board members admitted they'd struggled with depression. 2 had considered suicide at various points in their lives. 1 had actually attempted it and survived. It turned into this raw, honest conversation about the cost of success and the pressure we all put on ourselves to appear invincible. "So they kept you?" "They voted to give me a month of medical leave with full support to get help. Mandatory therapy, reduced schedule when I return, and a requirement that I build a support system outside of work. Robert said that if I was willing to get help, they were willing to stand by me.
But if I refused treatment or showed signs of deteriorating further, they'd have no choice but to replace me. That's actually pretty reasonable. It is. More than reasonable. It's generous, but it also means I have to do the work. Have to actually change, not just promise to change. And that's terrifying, because I don't know if I can. You can. Sophie's certainty was absolute. You're already doing it. You're here with us instead of at a meeting. You told the truth instead of hiding. You're learning. When did you become so wise? I told you, I had to grow up fast. But that's okay. Being wise helps me take care of Daddy. Marcus squeezed Victoria's hand. What does your treatment plan look like? I start therapy Monday with a trauma specialist. The board arranged for a comprehensive evaluation with a psychiatrist who specializes in high-functioning individuals with depression and PTSD. And they want me to... She paused, looking embarrassed. They want me to develop meaningful personal relationships outside of work. Said isolation is one of the biggest risk factors for what happened. So we're part of your treatment plan? Marcus tried to lighten the moment. No, you're part of my life. The treatment plan just acknowledges that I need to have a life worth living. Victoria looked at him directly. I want to be clear about something. I'm not befriending you because my board mandated it or because I'm trying to check off some box on a recovery checklist. I'm here because Tuesday night, you saw me at my absolute worst and still treated me like I mattered. Because Wednesday at the cafe, you and Sophie were more honest with me than anyone's been in years. Because for the first time since my parents died, I feel like I might actually deserve to be alive. The raw vulnerability in her voice cracked something open in Marcus's chest. He understood that feeling, the surprise of finding someone who made existence feel less like endurance and more like living. We're here because you make us feel less alone too. Sophie and we've been surviving in our own little bubble for 3 years. Safe, but isolated. You remind us that there's a bigger world out there. That connection is worth the risk. They sat in silence for a moment, hands still linked across the table. Sophie watching them both with those knowing eyes that saw too much. The waiter approached discreetly to ask if they needed anything else. Victoria requested the check, and when it arrived she handled it quickly before Marcus could even reach for his wallet. This was my invitation. And besides, I wanted to do this. Wanted to show you that friendship isn't transactional. I'm not buying your affection. I'm just grateful for your company. They left the restaurant and walked slowly back to the car, Sophie between them, holding both their hands. The October air was crisp, carrying the smell of the river and the promise of winter coming. Can we walk by the water, just for a minute? Victoria asked suddenly. Marcus wanted to say no, wanted to keep Sophie away from that dangerous edge, but he saw what Victoria was doing, facing her fear head on, refusing to let the river have power over her. Okay, but we stay back from the railing. They walked to the riverbank, keeping a safe distance from the edge, and stood looking at the dark water flowing past. It looked exactly the same as it had that Tuesday night. Relentless, powerful, indifferent. I'm not afraid of you anymore. Victoria spoke to the river, her voice steady. You're just water. My fear is what gave you power. That's very brave. I'm learning from the best, Victoria replied, looking at both of them. They stood there for a few more minutes, 3 people bound together by catastrophe and choice, watching the river flow past. It would always be there, Marcus realized. That darkness, that current, that potential for drowning. But standing here together, facing it instead of running, somehow made it less terrifying. The drive back to Marcus's apartment was quiet, Sophie falling asleep against his shoulder, exhausted from the rich food and emotional intensity of the evening. When they pulled up to his building, Victoria walked them to the door. "Thank you for tonight, for giving me a chance, for being honest, for showing me what healthy connection looks like. Thank you for the dinner, and for trusting us with your truth." They stood in the doorway, awkward suddenly, unsure how to end the evening. Finally, Victoria reached out and hugged him, a brief but tight embrace that spoke of gratitude and something more complicated. "I'll text you," she pulled back. "Please." "And Victoria, I'm proud of you, for what you did in that boardroom, for choosing to get help instead of hiding." Her smile was genuine and reached her eyes. "I'm proud of me, too. First time in a long time, I felt that."
Marcus carried Sophie upstairs, got her ready for bed while she was still half asleep, and tucked her in with a kiss to her forehead. Then he sat in the living room, processing everything that had happened. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "I meant what I said tonight. You and Sophie aren't part of a treatment plan. You're part of my life now. If that's okay." Marcus smiled and typed back, "It's more than okay. It's good. We're figuring this out together. Together. I like the sound of that." He was about to put his phone down when another message came through, this one longer. "I have my first therapy appointment Monday. I'm terrified, but I'm going to show up and do the work because you both deserve to have someone in your lives who's whole, not just surviving. Thank you for believing I can be that person." You already are that person. You're just learning to see what we already see. Marcus went to bed that night with a strange feeling in his chest, something that felt suspiciously like hope. For 3 years, he'd focused solely on keeping Sophie alive, on surviving each day, on managing grief and fear and exhaustion. Now, suddenly, there was someone else in their lives who mattered, someone who needed them and who they needed in return, someone who was broken like they were broken, but trying like they were trying. It should have felt like a burden. Instead, it felt like coming back to life. In her penthouse across the city, Victoria Harrison sat looking at the city lights and felt something similar. For the first time since her parents died, she wasn't alone with her demons. There were people who knew her truth and chose to stay anyway. The river kept flowing outside her window, dark and endless, but inside, something warm and fragile was beginning to grow. Something that looked like healing. Something that felt like home. 3 months later, Marcus stood at the same railing where it had all begun, looking at the river that had almost claimed Victoria's life. It was early January, the water partially frozen at the edges, the air cold enough to burn his lungs. But the sun was shining, and beside him stood the most important person in his world. Sophie, bundled in a purple winter coat, was feeding ducks that paddled in the unfrozen sections of the river. She looked healthier than she had in October, the new medication regimen working, her energy slowly returning. Weekly appointments had become bi-weekly, and while her condition would always require management, the immediate crisis had passed. Victoria stood on his other side, her hand in his, looking at the water without fear. She'd continued therapy, reduced her work hours, and slowly rebuilt her life with actual balance. The board had voted to keep her on as CEO, with conditions she'd not only met, but exceeded. More importantly, she'd stopped measuring her worth by her productivity and started measuring it by her connections. "I need to ask you something." Marcus spoke quietly while Sophie was distracted with the ducks. Victoria turned to him, and he saw curiosity and something else in her eyes. Trust, maybe, or the beginning of something deeper. The apartment is getting crowded with you staying over most nights. Your stuff everywhere. Sophie asking why you have to leave for work meetings. Marcus paused. I'm asking you to move in officially. Or we could get a bigger place together. Something that's ours instead of mine. I don't care about the logistics. I just want to stop pretending this is temporary. Want to build something permanent. If you want that too. Victoria was quiet for so long that Marcus's heart started to sink. Then she smiled, and it was radiant. I bought a house. What? Last week. I've been waiting for the right time to tell you. It's in Riverside Heights, near Sophie's school. 4 bedrooms, a backyard, room for all of us. I was going to ask if you'd consider living there with me. Both of you. Marcus stared at her. You bought a house? For us? I bought a house for me. To have a home instead of just a place to sleep. But yes, I bought it, hoping you'd both be part of that home. She paused. Unless that's too fast. Too presumptuous. I can sell it and we can figure something else out. He kissed her, stopping the worried words. When he pulled back, they were both smiling. Show me the house. Now. Right now. They collected Sophie, who was thrilled at the idea of a surprise, and drove to Riverside Heights. The house was beautiful. Not ostentatious despite Victoria's wealth, but warm and welcoming with big windows and a garden that would be stunning in spring. There's a room that could be perfect for you. Victoria showed Sophie a bedroom painted soft lavender with built-in bookshelves. And the backyard has space for a swing set if you want one. Sophie's eyes went wide. Really? Really? I was thinking we could pick one out together. While Sophie explored every corner of her potential room, Marcus and Victoria stood in the master bedroom, looking out the window at the river visible in the distance. I want to be able to see it, the river. I don't want to hide from what happened there or pretend it didn't change everything. It's part of our story now. Our story. I like the sound of that. There's something else, something I've been wanting to say but didn't know how. Victoria turned to face him. Just say it. We're past the point of careful words. I love you. The words came out in a rush, like she'd been holding them back for too long. I love you and Sophie and the life we're building together. I love that you see me at my worst and stay anyway. I love that you're teaching me what healthy love looks like. I love that I wake up excited to see you instead of dreading another empty day. Marcus pulled her close, his heart so full it hurt. I love you too. I didn't think I could love anyone again after Rachel. But you showed me that the heart has room for multiple truths. I can miss my wife and love you. I can honor my past and build a future. You taught me that. We taught each other. You learned from me how to be vulnerable and brave. I learned from you that it's okay to want more than just survival. Sophie appeared in the doorway, holding a set of house keys Victoria had apparently left for her to find. Are these ours? If you want them to be. If you're comfortable moving here, starting this next chapter together. Sophie looked between them, her expression serious. Will we still visit Mommy's grave? I don't want to forget her. Every Sunday, just like always. And we'll bring Victoria with us if you want. She's not replacing your mom, sweetheart. She's adding to our family, and you'll still be just my dad. And Victoria will be... Sophie paused, working through the complexity. What will you be? Victoria crouched down to Sophie's level. I'll be whatever you need me to be. A friend, a bonus mom, just Victoria,
You get to decide. Sophie thought about this with her characteristic seriousness. Then she launched herself at Victoria, wrapping her arms around her neck. You're my Victoria, and I love you even though you're not Mommy. Is that okay? That's more than okay. That's perfect. They moved in over the next month, blending their lives in ways both practical and profound. Marcus's worn furniture mixed with Victoria's expensive pieces, creating something uniquely theirs. Sophie's artwork went up on the walls alongside Victoria's collected photography. The kitchen became a collaboration, Marcus's simple cooking style meeting Victoria's willingness to learn, and frequent disasters that ended in laughter and takeout. The media attention faded as Victoria had predicted, replaced by new scandals and newer stories. Occasionally, someone would recognize them, ask about the river incident, but mostly the world moved on. The people who mattered knew their truth. The rest was just noise. Victoria's therapy continued, and she invited Marcus to some sessions to work through their relationship dynamics, to make sure they were building something healthy instead of just clinging to each other out of shared trauma. They learned to fight productively, to communicate clearly, to give each other space when needed while maintaining connection. Sophie's health stabilized, though it would always require vigilance, but they faced the appointments and medication adjustments together now, Victoria learning the medical terminology and asking questions the doctors appreciated. She was there for the scary moments and the victories, fully invested in Sophie's well-being. 6 months after moving in together, on a warm June evening, Victoria asked Marcus to walk with her to the river. Sophie was at a sleepover, her first, a milestone that felt enormous, and they had the rare luxury of time alone. They stood at the railing where everything had started, the water flowing past in the last light of day. Victoria had insisted they return here periodically, refusing to let fear reclaim this space. I have something to tell you. There was nervousness in her voice that made Marcus's heart skip. Okay. The board offered me a promotion. Chairman of the board, stepping back from day-to-day CEO operations. I'd still be involved, but with more flexibility, more balance. Robert would take over as CEO. That's incredible. What did you say? I said yes. But that's not the important part. She turned to face him fully. I said yes because I want more time for this. For us. For building a life that's about more than work. She paused. And because I want to adopt Sophie, if you'll let me, if she wants that. I love her like she's mine. I want to make it official. Want her to know she has 2 parents who are fully committed to her, legally and emotionally. I know it's huge, and we should probably talk to her first, and maybe I'm overstepping. We should ask her. But Victoria, if she says yes, and I think she will, then yes. 1,000 times yes. They asked Sophie together the next morning over pancakes. Her reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. She'd been calling Victoria my Victoria for months, and making it official just made sense to her 7-year-old logic. The adoption process took months, but by Sophie's 8th birthday in September, it was final. They celebrated with a small party in the backyard, just the 3 of them, Rachel's mother, who'd embraced Victoria with surprising warmth, and a few of Sophie's school friends. That night, after the guests left and Sophie was asleep, Marcus and Victoria sat on the back porch watching the sunset. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for this to be too good to be true. Bad things will still happen. Sophie will have health scares. We'll fight. Life will throw challenges at us. But we'll face them together. Together. I still can't believe I have that. A year ago, I was standing at a railing ready to let go of everything, and now I have everything I never knew I needed. Do you ever regret it? That night? Victoria considered the question seriously. I regret the pain I caused. To you, to Sophie, to everyone who worried, but I don't regret where it led. Sometimes we have to break completely to rebuild into something stronger. We're stronger now, all of us. The years that followed weren't perfect. Victoria still had days where the darkness crept in, and she had to actively fight it with therapy and medication and leaning on her family.
Marcus still had moments of paralysis when Sophie got sick, still felt Rachel's absence like a physical ache. Sophie still struggled with her limitations, with being different from other kids, with the reality of her condition. But they had each other. They had honesty and trust, and the willingness to show up even when it was hard. They had a home filled with laughter and tears, and the messy reality of people choosing to love each other despite and because of their brokenness. On a cold October evening, exactly 3 years after the night at the river, they returned to the railing one more time. Sophie was 10 now, taller and stronger, her latest cardiac tests showing remarkable stability. Victoria was grounded in a way she'd never been before, her success measured in moments instead of metrics. Marcus had learned to breathe again, to live instead of just survive. They stood together, looking at the dark water. 3 people bound by catastrophe and choice. I'm glad I slipped.
You jumped, Sophie corrected with the bluntness she'd never outgrown. Maybe a little of both, but I'm glad Marcus was there, glad he didn't walk past, glad he was brave enough to jump in after a stranger. You're not a stranger anymore. You're family. You're home. Home. And the word held everything. Love and safety and belonging. The things Victoria thought died in a fire 25 years ago. The things Marcus thought died with Rachel. The things Sophie thought she'd never have again. But they'd found it anyway. Built it from scars and honesty and the courage to stay when leaving would have been easier. The river kept flowing, dark and endless and indifferent, but it had given them this, a chance meeting that became a lifeline, a moment of catastrophe that became the beginning of healing. 3 broken people who'd found wholeness in choosing each other.
They turned away from the water together and walked home through the October evening, hand in hand in hand, carrying their pasts and their futures, their fears and their hopes, all of it woven together into something that looked remarkably like love.